What's going on, guys? In this video, we're going to be going through Tanlorin's skill lines, all three of them, to include her racial passive, which is called Spirited. We'll get into that in a second. But with that, also, we're going to be going through all three of her skill lines, all from Draconic Armor, Empathic Fighter, and Radiating Heart. If you're excited, or at least expect some sort of value from this video, do me a huge favor, drop a like on this video. Also, subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, because it really does help this channel grow. So with that being said, let's go ahead and just jump right into it. Alright guys, so as you guys can see, I have Tanlorin here. She's all set up as the Spirited Warrior build that I have on the channel. If you guys haven't seen it, it seems to be a very good one. It really hit it off very well. Go ahead and check that video out. I'll definitely leave a link to that in the description down below. But as I always do, in this video, we're going to be starting with the actual racial passive, or the high elf skill, so to speak, as you guys can see right in front of me, is the skill called Spirited. Spirited decreases damage taken by 3%, increases damage done by 3%. So with that being said, this character, or this companion, seems to really thrive on damage dealing, specifically, as you guys can see in that previous build. As I said already, I highly suggest you guys watch it, because it really does it really is a great build, and I highly suggest it. But it really does amplify her damage dealing abilities, but on top of that, it also decreases damage taking, so it really helps with her tankiness and all that stuff, which of course she's half Dragonite and half you know, soul magic. So because of her half Dragonite part, she's also a pretty decent tank, as you guys will see in a future tank video for her, so stay tuned for that. But we'll get into that in a second. She could be either or, but who knows? She could probably be a good healer too. Stay tuned for those videos as well. In Draconic Power, the first skill on there is called Blazing Grasp. Essentially what this does is that it has a 0.2 second cast time at the target, at the enemy as the target. The range is 10 to 22 meters, and the cooldown is 8 seconds. It is pretty important to say that the range is from 10 to 22, because it does not activate unless she is more than 10 meters away. So even though, as you guys will see in the description, that this does act as a taunt, it's probably not the best taunt to use if that is your goal for using this skill, because she won't use it if she's within that threshold. So the tooltip reads as: Tanlorin launches a fiery chain to grasp and pull an enemy to them, taunting them for 15 seconds if they are not already taunted. But as you guys can see in the little blue section in the bottom part of the tooltip, it says use when the enemy can be moved and is further than 10 meters away. So again, if they're within that 10-meter radius, they're not going to use this skill at all. In other words, you're going to have gaps in the taunt. Probably not going to be the best taunting ability, probably best for a secondary taunt if that's what you want to do, but again, it's not the best for your primary taunt. Next one is Extinguishing Breath. Cast time 0.4 seconds in an area target, radius 8 meters, and the cooldown is 16 seconds. Tanlorin channels draconic energy to suck in the air around them, dealing 4,497 flame damage to enemies nearby and heating themselves for 1,897 health. Any enemy hit that is casting is interrupted and stunned for 2 seconds. After 2.5 seconds, they exhale fire, dealing 4,497 fire damage to nearby enemies. This is essentially the Dragonite like inhale ability. Breathes in hot fire, whatever. In that inhale, it does damage, and then after a few seconds, 2.5 to be exact, she explodes all of that, dealing more damage to nearby enemies. Pretty good area DPS type, although it doesn't do a ton of damage. It does a decent amount of damage, so it's okay. It's not a bad one. The thing that sucks about this is the cooldown is at 16 seconds, so that's pretty high for this threshold. So either A, use Telbani Efficiency, or B, use the Quicken effect, or a combination of both if you're going to be using this, because this cooldown is way too high for the amount of damage that this does, in my personal opinion. The last one on this skill line is Igneous Armor. Cast time 0.2 seconds in an area 12-meter radius, duration for 6 seconds, and a 12-second cooldown. The cooldown, once again, is pretty average at best. It's on the higher end of the spectrum, where I would consider acceptable, but still, it is what it is. Tanlorin releases their inner dragon to gain major resolve for themselves and their grouped allies, increasing their physical and spell resistance by 5,948 for 6 seconds. They gain a damage shield that absorbs up to 9,296 damage for 6 seconds, scaling off their max health. Okay, so the numbers that you guys see in white obviously are adjustable based off of the build that you have equipped on her, and some of the, depending on what it is, but sometimes depending on your own personal gear too, like Telvanni efficiency, for example, will reduce your cooldown, for example. This overall is good if you're going to be running her as a tank. It kind of helps with her survivability since she does get physical and spell resistance. It might not be a ton of physical and spell resistance, but it's still something that will help her stay alive. So with that being said, it's a pretty decent skill overall for a tank in particular, but I can see certain circumstances where you might want to use this as a as like survivability for a DPS type of build, but that's a decision that you know you're gonna have to make individually. I'm gonna leave Empathic Fighter as the last one because it's very unique to her character, and I really enjoy that skill line, so I'm gonna leave that last. It's also the skill line that has her ultimate. So for now, let's go to Radiating Heart with one of my favorite Dragon Knight heals between Bastion and her, of course, is Kindle. 0.3 seconds of cast time in an area radius of 28 meters, and the cooldown is 8 seconds. Really low, by the way. Tanlorin launches a searing fireball at themselves or an ally to cauterize their wounds, healing for 7,590 health. As you guys can see in the blue, it says used when Tanlorin or an ally is at 75% health or below. So long story short, the combination of doing a decent amount of health healing of 7,590 with a relatively, well, pretty low cooldown of 8 seconds, this ends up being always active. And with that, of course, comes with the effectiveness of the skill. This skill is a great one because it will be used quite frequently and quite often if needed, of course. So it's like one of those oh crap type of heals. Like, I rather just have a quick burst heal and call it a day, keep my survivability up right then and there. It's not a heal over time or anything like that, so it's not going to be the prolonged healing, but if it's the quick I need the heal, this is the great move for you. It's one of my favorite heals for companions overall. Really recommend that one. Next up is Volcanic Arms, and this is more of a utility. It has a cast time of 0.2 seconds in an area target, radius of 28 meters, duration 8 seconds, and the cooldown for 16 seconds. The cooldown is in the longer range, but it's still okay because this will improve your damage dealt just while she activates this skill, because Tanlorin charges their grouped allies weapons with volcanic power to gain major brutality and sorcery, increasing weapon and spell damage by 20% for 8 seconds. So even though the cooldown is at 8 seconds, the fact of the matter is that for the 8 seconds while this skill is active, you're going to be increasing your damage dealt by 20% because of the weapon and spell damage increase by 20%. So it ends up being a great utility skill, and I could actually see her having a build surrounded by this skill, kind of like a utility companion, so to speak. Really good skill in my opinion. You could always just mitigate the cooldown on this by getting some quicken traits on her gear. And if that's the route you want to take, I could see this being a pretty solid skill all the way around, especially if you can mitigate that 16 seconds down to at least half, and then this will be up at all times, you know? And the last one in this skill line is Haze of Cinders. Haze of Cinders has a cast time of 0.3 seconds at an area target, 28 meters of range, 5 meter radius, 8 seconds duration, and the cooldown for 12 seconds. Tanlorin summons a scorching cloud of ash at the target's location for 8 seconds, reducing enemy movement speed by 70% and healing them and their allies for 1,897 health every 2 seconds. So the thing I like about this is that it does offer utility to what I would consider more so a tanking skill. The reason why I say that is because it does reduce the movement speed of the enemies within that area, but on top of that, it heals every single one of you and your allies that are within that by 1,897 health every 2 seconds. So it ends up being a utility slash survivability skill, and kind of like damage, a crowd control type of situation as well. So it ends up being a pretty solid skill if you're running a tank build, in my opinion. I know if I was gonna make a tanking build, I would probably look into this skill and see if this is something that I would want as utility for my tank, but we'll get there when we get there. Last but not least, an epic empathic fighter. We're going to start with the actual active abilities first, and we'll end up with the actual ultimate. So the first one is Internal Conflict. Internal Conflict has a cast time of 0.4 seconds at the enemy for the target, 28 meter range, duration 6 seconds, and a cooldown of 8 seconds. So the cooldown is really short, which is something I really love about this skill in particular, but the skill line is fantastic in general. The tooltip reads as: Tanlorin lays claim to an enemy's soul, dealing 13,492 magic damage, sorry about that, to their target over 6 seconds. Long story short, this is a fantastic skill. In a period of 6 seconds, it does a massive amounts of damage with a very low cooldown of 8 seconds. And you can easily get that 8 seconds down to 6 seconds and have that ticking at all times, which is absolutely insane of a skill. If I'm being completely honest, I think that cooldown is a little bit too low for her. As you guys can see in the actual Spirited Warrior build, this skill is absolutely insane and does an insane amount of damage, and it's great. I love it. But whatever, don't tell Bethesda or ZeniMax that I said that the cooldown needs to be higher though. Explosive Fortitude. Cast time 0.3 seconds at an area target, radius 8 meters, duration 6 seconds, cooldown 12 seconds. So pretty average cooldown on this one. Tanlorin's soul explodes outward, dealing 4,497 magic damage around them. When they take damage, deal an additional 4,497 magic damage to nearby enemies. This effect can occur once every 2 seconds over 6 seconds. So it's not just a single target attack, but also, it's not just a single target attack, but it also does an area attack to all the enemies around, right? So she initially explodes, and then once that damage gets applied, another one essentially comes for doing double damage every 6 seconds, every 2 seconds, over a period of 6 seconds. So that's quite a few ticks of that damage, ends up being pretty solid. And if you're using it pretty frequently, if she's using it pretty frequently because you have either quickened or the Talvani efficiency, this ends up doing damage pretty frequently and pretty well over that duration. So overall, this by itself isn't a solid, isn't a over the top great ability, but when you start mixing this with the rest of your ability priority, it ends up being pretty solid all the way around. Last but not least in the regular abilities is Shatter Spirit. Shatter Spirit has a 0.3 second cast time at an enemy, range 28 meters, radius as 6 meters, duration 8 seconds, and a cooldown at 16 seconds. Tanlorin burns an enemy from the inside with Soulfire, dealing 13,485 magic damage over 8 seconds. Upon completion, the Soulfire overflows and explodes from the enemy, dealing 8,994 magic damage to all enemies near them. So this is another one of those skills that is absolutely insane. It does a lot of damage. It has a really high cooldown, although again, if you're using Talvani efficiency or the quicken trait, this can be mitigated quite a lot, which I would recommend because this skill alone does a massive amounts of damage. But as you can see, it all scales. It goes from 8 to 12 to 16. So if you play your cards right, you can literally probably put the 16-second attack like first or whatever, and then it'll just kind of like tick down and have like a little trickle down effect, and you will always have some empathic fighter skill always active at any given time. I kind of have it kind of mixed up a little bit where I have the 12-second one right here, the quick one, and then the long one at the end. So either way, it ends up being a ton of damage regardless. As far as the ultimate is pretty solid as well, especially when it comes to like crowd control type of situation, and it's called Ruinous Outburst. Ruinous Outburst has a cast time of 0.4 seconds, area target 15 meters. The area is 15 by 10 meters, so it's a pretty decently sized area that this affects, and it costs 200 ultimate. Tanlorin swipes each hand, sending a massive wave of power to crash into enemies in front of them, dealing 8,994 magic damage, followed by a second wave after 0.5 seconds, dealing 4,497 magic damage. Enemies hit are knocked back and stunned for 2.5 seconds. So this does essentially like a 1-2 punch, so to speak. The first sweep that she does a pretty decently sized 8,994 damage, followed by the second swing, which does about half of that. And then not only that, but it also does like a crowd control type of situation where it stuns the enemy for 2.5 seconds. This is a great skill for pretty much everything that you can think of. Like if you're running her as a DPS, this helps with her crowd control abilities, which a lot of these skills right here will do area of effect type situation. So if they're stunned and then you're, you know, AoEing them, they're gonna die pretty quickly. They won't even know what's coming. But on the other side of that spectrum, of course, if you're running some type of tank with crowd control, this will also knock them back, dealing having that knockback effect and then stunning them for 2.5 seconds, allowing you to do that massive damage outburst to be able to take out the crowd control. Maybe not so much on the healing side, but I can see that being viable there as well. This is a great skill, a great ultimate. Doesn't do a ton of damage, but the utility behind it is very, very solid, to say the least. Well, there you guys have it. That was the skills for Tanlorin. Tanlorin ends up being up there with one of the better companions in terms of utility and actual usage, to include damage dealing and even some tanking situations. Tanlorin is a fantastic character just all the way around. I'm not huge in her personality, but in terms of her skills as a whole, she's absolutely fantastic. Her skills are great in every way, shape, and form. I can't really think of a lot wrong with them, but most of that's up for opinion, and you know, I'll let you guys make the decision on that. I know I like Tanlorin's DPS capabilities personally, but that's neither here nor there. If you got any value of this video whatsoever, do me a huge favor, drop a like on this video. Also subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, because it really does help this channel grow. So with that being said, catch you guys on the next one. Deuces.